Hello, welcome to Plant Powered Metro New York's Black History Month session tonight called Soulful Seeds Cultivating Black Wellness with Plant-Based Nutrition. I'm Chef Rebecca. I'm a plant powered, and that's one of my favorite phrases these days, as everyone knows, and health supportive chef and educator, wellness advocate. I live in Harlem, New York. And in my role at Plant Powered Metro New York, I'm a culinary and a partnerships manager. And all of that is done in service to supporting people of every age and stage through plant based and whole foods nutrition for lifestyle changes. That's my own story. You may hear a little bit about it tonight. You will certainly hear some of that from our guests. So, as your host today, we represent a community driven organization that empowers people from diverse backgrounds to find better health and overcome chronic disease with plant powered nutrition. Plant Powered Metro New York is coming up on 5 years of increasing awareness of the science and far reaching health impact of whole plant food diets, which you'll hear more about. Many of you may have participated in educational events online or in person, or culinary demonstration or cooking classes that we give. Maybe it was through our peer mentorship program or our Jumpstart program, which is happening right now. Some of you found our community through a friend or family member after watching a documentary or reading about us in a book that opened your eyes wide, or through a community organization. Wherever you are, our work is to help you get healthy and to understand why and how. So you can get our community recipe app to learn more about cooking for health, and you will find that in the feed or chat, depending on where you're watching from. And so we're so super happy that you have joined us. And so please share your comments and questions on Facebook or YouTube. And so wherever you are from, wherever you're watching from. And so if you're watching on YouTube, though, please subscribe to make sure that you catch more plant powered Metro events in the weeks and months to come, and to cause Google to make this life changing conversation widely available. We are here tonight to honor Black history, this month-long celebration of contributions by the Black community from across the diaspora. Among other things, this conversation will include personal experiences about farming and food as a way to usher in health and healing that is proven to be possible through a whole foods plant-based diet. I'm so excited about our guests tonight, both social entrepreneurs and game changers in the world of food and wellness, Jacque Salomon and Henry Obispo. If you saw our post, then you also know that Ismail Samad was on the agenda, but sadly he will not be here tonight. However, we are planning to have Ismail come back at another time. Jacque Salomon, intersectional activist and conscious parenting coach, is the founder and president of Seeds to Inspire, a 501c3 organization. Through Jackie's visionary work at Seeds to Inspire, she started a coaching practice in trauma-informed wellness. She was certified in lifestyle medicine and trained in neuro-distinct education, and that is all in support and protection of children and families. As a nationally recognized speaker, her focus is racialized trauma resilience. Jacque has educated clinicians and medical students about the need to focus on lifestyle changes that prevent, treat, and reverse disease, whereby they can help their patients replace unhealthy behaviors with beneficial ones. Jacque was called on by the Centers for Disease Control during COVID-19 to address burnout among their workforce. As a healer, proud mom of 3 sons, and adoptive mom to 6 unsheltered fur companions, Jacque is going to take us on her journey of life lessons and expertise of addressing the effects of trauma and damaging food systems by prioritizing and connecting with food and health in order to live fuller and healthier lives and build a legacy for our children and future generations. Henry Obispo, eco-gastronomer and food justicer, was born in the Dominican Republic, which is where his rich culture fueled his passion for community and food. At 5 years old, Henry moved to the Bronx, where he pursued higher education through scholarships provided by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to finally achieve his PhD. Henry pioneered ReBORN Farms, which recently won an award from the Boss Culinary Center. He founded the United Business Cooperative, a business and community cooperative based in the South Bronx, the first of its kind and winner of the Thrive Competition Award from the New York City Economic Development Corporation. Henry has lived and worked in Cuba and among other places in Rio de Janeiro through a United Nations program. Henry's innovative approach to food and sustainability can be seen in the famed The Bronx Salad and his food and tech enterprise, Born Juice. These two respected leaders have come to contribute tonight in countless ways to an alternative and compelling narrative that is changing how many of us see the world, experience health, and relate to food. Listen closely to these health leaders, and we invite you to share this recording with others so they don't miss out on this health transforming experience. Please feel free to offer questions in the comments, and we'll get to as many as we can. Welcome, Jacque and Henry.
Such an honor to be here. Thank you. I'm excited to be back and connected with New York, my hometown. So it's an honor. Thank you.
Why don't you tell people where you are now?
I am in the ancestral unceded lands of the Akimel Ottoman Pipash people, which is more formally known as Phoenix, Arizona.
So glad to have you here, Jacque. And we have had a couple of conversations leading up to tonight. So super happy that we're here together. And Henry as well. We had a conversation recently, and it was just wonderful listening to the two of you. And Henry is not new on various events that we've had in the past. And because you've been traveling all over the globe, Henry, I've been in your LinkedIn chat area trying to get you back. So I'm super happy that you're here tonight.
It's an honor to be here with you. We've been talking about getting together since almost a year. It would be 2023. And yeah, because of my travels, it wasn't able to come to fruition until now. So I'm very grateful to be a part of this and to be in conversation with you and with everyone in the audience.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I love your plant in the back. And you said it was a ficus. And so now my goals for 2024 is to get a plant like you, Henry. So you'll have to give us some tips on growing things because we know you're really
sure. I got you.
So I want to ask both of you about this intersection, which is why we're here, to talk about food, trauma, and race, and how you see it in your work, how you see the relationship between the three in your work. If you could share a little bit about that.
Sure. I mean, I can start. Wow, that's a very, I don't know where to even start because there's so many layers and it's so loaded, for lack of a better word. It's really when we're thinking about community and the issues that arise. A lot of these issues, if not most of the issues, specifically in urban areas, but I would also say globally, is a 500-year-old issue called colonization, right? And it's really, these are the branches, the issues that we're engaging with in our communities are really sort of springing from this, that reality. And so when we're talking about intersectionality in terms of the work, the issues on the ground, it really sort of yes, needs to be looked at individually, but also you have to understand where it comes from, so that you're able to find a way out. And so, the ways that they're related are, there's a root aspect to this. And so with any way that one is trying to engage these issues, it's really sort of meeting them where they are in the moment, but also having that reference point of the root, right? And I would say that is, when we speak of intersectionality, that is where it all leads, at least for me. And it's being able to identify that so that in our process to remedy, we are decolonizing and engaging it in a very opposite way at the root also. So I would start there with that.
Thank you. How about you, Jackie?
Thank you so much, Henry, for that. What you made me think about is that intersectionality. And I think that was the most powerful part of healing for myself, and what led me to marry the trauma work with the health component was when I realized that it was all intertwined. And that's what I think is the beauty of lifestyle medicine. It really does address all the pillars of what life and vibrancy and how it affects you. And what I noticed for me specifically, especially with my trauma, that the trauma that started with my body, right? My body was traumatized not only because of the stress that I was under, my body was traumatized because I was poisoning her little by little every day. My body was traumatized because I was a mother and I had life flow through me, and I didn't know how to parent in a healthy, balanced way. There was trauma that I inherited just in my DNA. So going through the healing journey was, my goodness, it felt like everything that I was doing was wrong. It felt like there were no answers. There was just nothing for me. And I think that was the greatest piece. So to understand that we, in this time and place, are not living truly as human beings. We're not living in tune in the cycles with nature, connected with nature. We're not connected to one another. We have loads of stress on us. We are constantly feeding our bodies foods that are not helpful and are contributing to the diseases from childhood. So all of those traumas are all intersecting at the same time. And then you just bring in the whole caste and race and the systems in place that perpetuate this lack of health and lack of access to health and lack of access to food. And then you realize that it's one giant net that we find ourselves wrapped up in that causes the diseases in our bodies.
When you were talking, Henry, I had a picture of waterways, and you know how you have a huge lake or river, and then there are these smaller tributaries that go out. I felt like in this case of this, when we're looking at systems, we're just looking at the tributaries. We're not seeing the origin. And so the origin is the larger part. It's the mass, right? But one of the hopeful things about that is it's still a flow. So we can interject. And I feel like when I was listening to you all talking the other day and even today, there are ways to interject into those places and change the flow. And I know that is the work that you all are doing. And when you talk, Jackie, about the systems, I'd like you to share, if you can, both of you, a little bit more about what those systems are.
Sure. I'll share my story of my family and how I discovered how those systems were working against us, if that's okay. So my healing journey truly started when my eldest son passed away from an allergic reaction to a prescribed pharmaceutical. And what started was the typical response that I was entrained to believe was that somehow we had done something wrong and it was our fault. But through the journey of discovering that story was not the truth and that story was not mine, is that I discovered the systems that were in place. to deal with mental health, to deal with stress, to deal with disruptions in the family, to deal with the trauma that the school system imposes on our babies, especially our neurodistinct babies, and the trauma that that brings home to our families. The food that we're feeding them in the schools, the food that we're feeding, that we're bringing home, and we think we're loving our children. Those are all systems that are prescribing what we know, when we know it, what we eat, what we drink, what we breathe, how we connect, what the rules are to be who you are. All of those are systems. And I think that that's a lot to digest, which is why it's taken me a while to get through that, because through the process, it's an alchemical process of realization that there's a giant system in place, and it was very overwhelming. And you feel small in that. But I think part of the healing journey is to go through that and remember that we have everything we need inside of us, and health is our right, peace is our right, love is our human right. And then when we can attach to that story on the side, that no system in place can stand against us working on our healing. And when I started choosing to love myself more than the diseases were trying to make me feel, that's when I started feeling empowered to learn more, to understand the systems and understand my role in them. And when I understood my role in them, when I understood that that system had hijacked my love for my children, had hijacked my consciousness, had hijacked my story of who I thought I was, a good human being doing the best I can. And when I realized that that system had told me that I was doing the best I can with what I had, because I didn't know any better, because I didn't have access to any better, that enraged me. And so I started revoking my consent in certain systems and finding other systems that were contributing to my well-being and the well-being of my family. And so then I decided to become a part of that system and that new system and that network.
And from what I know about you, building a new system, which is what I'm seeing you do in your work. Henry, did you want to talk about the systems?
Well, first yes, I do. First, I want to talk about your story, Jacque. Thank you for sharing. It's very, we need to hear these stories, these real stories, and the voices need to be heard. And I specifically love the revoking aspect of it. I mean, we need that in our language, because we need to also understand that, we can decide, even though it feels like we don't have a choice. You can decide what you can opt in and opt out of certain things. And so, in general, I would say systems. I mean, I will use my neighborhood, or where I'm from, specifically here in the Bronx, and sort of address why we are where we are, and it's systems. I'll just name some that really bring it home. I think this idea, we already have an idea of segregation, right, as a system, and then what prompts something like that is this idea of redlining, right, or beyond an idea is the implementation of it. So when we're talking about systems, specifically here in the Bronx, you're thinking about a system that allows for redlining to happen, for poverty to accumulate, for example, for buildings to be torched, so that there's benefit for some that torch buildings, as what happened here in the Bronx, destruction of infrastructure as a result of taking insurance money and then fleeing, building wealth somewhere else within the system that allows them for you to gut one area to be able to take your wealth with you and engage somewhere else. And so a system like that also creates devastation, creates this idea of eternal poverty almost, because it's generational. When we're talking about one of the highest accumulations of public housing and what public housing should mean, but what it actually means in the current reality, which is sort of like systematic subjugation of sorts of its population because of the lack of services and just the cycle of poverty and violence, etc., that it foments. So the system does that as well. The systems also take food out of your neighborhoods, and by default also implement this sort of a ration of sorts because you only have access to certain things. And this is the same system that also engages your mental health, to your point, Jacque, as well as your educational system. So when it's all in many ways created not necessarily for you, but when it's actively working to either destroy you or keep you somewhere specific, then you have to sort of really either do away with these systems or be able to, in some ways, subvert these systems. And there are many ways to do that, and many ways that people are choosing to do that locally because they have now awareness that it's all connected and it's all derivative of this extractive model that's been implemented on us.
So yes, when you talk about the Bronx in particular, there's someone that I think about, which is, hi, Crystal, Karen Washington. And so when you look at the statistics, there's so many statistics out there, but even in the USDA talks about 19 million people in the United States living in low-income urban areas that are more than a mile away from a supermarket. So there was all this movement for a while, which we all know, about food deserts and how people can address food deserts. And I think when you were talking about coming in neighborhoods and sort of co-opting neighborhoods, even some of those who were doing good were adding to that. But then Karen, like years ago, said, it's not a food desert, it's food apartheid. And then that shifted the whole thing, which is what you were talking about too, Jacque, which having heard your story before, but again, that you thought something was wrong with you. And I almost feel that the systems are built that way. And who can say, and people always say, well, is it intentional or not intentional? What matters is how it's impacting people. That's what matters. And so I have, my own health story, which is what brought me to this work. But absolutely, I could relate to you, Jacque, that I thought something was wrong with me, like even physically, even mentally, right? When I didn't realize that I was reacting and responding to the environment that was created by someone else. And when you say revoking, that word is great. It's really, when we talked the other day, it's really about taking back what belongs to us as human beings. And so that's the work. So I know that you talking about the intersection of race and food. And then, of course, right now we're even talking about the discrimination that happened. But I'd also like to hear now some other strategies that you may have, that you have found through your years of work and the exposure to different things you've been doing that address these issues in Black and Brown communities. And I'd like to start with you, Jacque, if you could talk about lifestyle medicine.
Certainly. So I believe what we're dealing with, the crisis of health, is with the chronic diseases. And I think it's the lack of education and the inundation of false information. We have, and I'm excited to see such a surge and self-care being centered in our communities here in the Phoenix metropolitan area. Our communities are standing up and really identifying how ridiculous it is that our babies are now experiencing chronic diseases that in my lifetime, that I remember as a youth, were old people diseases. That now our children are being sent for bariatric surgery or to have medications for obesity in middle school. And this is being normalized. So this is critical. This is a critical conversation to have. And this is why I'm such a strong proponent in lifestyle medicine, because it does address the other things besides nutrition. Listen, if you are chronically under stress, you're not sleeping, your social connections are very controlling, oppressive, not respectful, you haven't found the love for yourself and prioritized yourself. Learning about how transitioning away from certain foods is not going to be on top, front and center. So that's why it's important that we become trauma informed. And trauma informed is not just cultural competency, but it's cultural humility. That we understand who we are, and that we are all settlers in someone else's land, in someone else's home. So we have to be very mindful and very compassionate with ourselves. We have to be very supportive of one another and understand that there's social determinants of health that are impacting us. So we have to bring evidence-based, unbiased programming to our communities that meet us where we are, understand that there are issues outside of ourselves, systemically, institutionally, that prohibit us from making the best choices, and create systems of support and community to move us through. When I transitioned into this lifestyle, I didn't have a community. I was sick. My children were incredibly sick. We were all chronically obese. And all that there was, let's give you more pills. Let's put your twins who are teenagers on statins. Like those were the options. That's where it was taking me. And I didn't know about lifestyle medicine at the time. But what happened was I started learning about, is this true? Are there no other options? And I learned and I learned. But you know what? I had to pay for that. I had to pay for the books. I had to pay for the courses. I had to pay all these things. And through all that, what I discovered was all these things that were put in place for me to eat and to feed my children, to take care of them, were killing us slowly. And I, as the mother and the head of household, was leading the charge. So I think it's critical that we talk about lifestyle medicine, because we have to talk about the other factors of health that affect our community, specifically by design, our communities. And I'll use the language, it is by design. And it is imposed. There is imposed lack of access. There's imposed nutrition apartheid. There's imposed ignorance around these matters. So I think all of that is something that we can come together through coaching, through programming, and through collaboration to create systems where people can find evidence-based information, can find the support, and can see themselves in another to find that intrinsic motivation to make sometimes really challenging behavioral shifts. But we know through evidence, and I'm living evidence, I'm testimony, that there is so much beauty and vibrant life on the other side.
Yes, you've done it, Jackie. And so we appreciate that you're here now to help others do the same. Henry, did you have anything to add there?
I was enthralled by Jackie's story. I mean, it's all of that, and for me, is starting from this idea of education is just so important, because really that's I would say over a decade now when I started working in the community around ideas of food and health. One of the things, well, for me, it's really three things, right? I have to center, obviously, food. I've been engaging with food since I was very, 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 very young. I've been cooking since I was very young. I tell people, guys, I've been cooking since I was 2.5, 3 years old. Like, people don't understand how, but trust, I have. And I've also been in this world of wonderment when it comes to nature, at the same time, and really obsessing around this idea of just what nature could produce, and like being in awe of plants, but also really a fruitarian from a very early age. Just in the only word that comes to mind is obsession. I had an obsession with fruit and where they came from, and how such things could happen out of nowhere, and just how nature engaged in it. And so here, I with the projects I was creating, or the initiatives, it was really with those almost three pillars or components in display, which was people and food, but really also nature and the environment in a place like the Bronx, in terms of like thinking of solutions, and especially because I grew up here, and to your point earlier about areas of the Bronx that are considered food desert, but really food apartheid. Thanks to Karen Washington, now we have a word that actually frames what's going on in our communities. And so, because I grew up in food apartheid, I understood what was absent, and what needed to happen for people to really understand. So, it was launching these ideas, but with this educational component. Anything that is launched has to have this educational component, because there is a steep learning curve as a result of the systems, and so there is an educational aspect, but it has to be met with the cultural aspect as well. It's not from sort of like this top down idea of educating. For me, it's really more co-creating with whomever you're engaging with, and allowing them in many ways to teach themselves and to learn themselves, and just really creating the space for that, or the environment for that. And so for me, from the very beginning, and in every component that I bring forward, is really bringing together things that are usually sort of offered to our communities as in silos. And it's that level of education, but bringing, for example, those three pillars together so that people can see how interconnected they are. And to the point that 10 years later, that's exactly how we're engaging in communities, really through this social, cultural aspect, but again, offering a holistic approach, which is, what systems in many ways don't allow for. They want to sort of like break these components and silo them.
Yeah, I feel like our culture is invading the larger culture in a way that has not been so for a long time. And since my world is food, and I know much of your world is food as well, as you were saying, Jacque, I'm so excited to see this happening, this surge. Why? Because people are ill. They're sick, and they don't know why they're ill, or in your case and mine, they think they're doing something, when it really is the fact that we've kind of like, when you think about Malcolm X talk about being hoodwinked, right, led astray, and that's facts. Dr. Batista, he talks about slave food, which is one of the things that was traumatizing for me, is that my dad grew up on a farm. He was sent down to the farm from Philadelphia because he needed his grandfather to sort of be the disciplinarian. And in that case, he came back, and I grew up eating what would be called slave food, pig feet, chitlins, hog maws, blah, blah. But my father died at 63 years old, right? And that has spurred me to not live that way. Oh, it tasted good. Wasn't good for me, right? And I don't really like to make people think that, I'm saying anything negative about food that are, African American food, because we're extremely creative to make delicious food. And a lot of the food that we eat in America, mac and cheese, whatever, comes from our culture. But now I find that it's this love, when you talk about being a fruitarian, like 2 and 3 and 4 years old, and your obsession, right? I feel like, because I work a lot with kids, Jackie, and one of the things I loved about kids is I could put one fruit in front of them, and they would see the color, the texture, the shape without me even saying anything. They'd be so intrigued and almost obsessed, like you're saying. And so I think there's a connection when we're born into the world, no pun intended, that allows us to connect with food, but it's been lost. And we need to bring that back. Right now we're doing the Jumpstart at Plant Powered Metro New York. And when you talk about education, it's all education. It is teaching people the science of food, the studies that are around a chronic disease, but also putting in their hands tools for how to cook, how to shop. They actually get a mentor that walks them through these 4 weeks of changing. And we hear tremendous stories. But one of the things that always impacts me is that, a plant-based diet has the potential to influence and in some cases reverse disease. The studies are there. But, but what I'm finding is in our communities, there seems to be this resistance. And I also often found when I was like in school communities that it was more about this emotional connection to the actual food, not knowing that it's doing harm, that people were really focused on. And, a plant-based diet is basic in terms of, it's fruits, vegetables, legumes, nuts, and seeds. But then there is a healthier aspect to it, which is the whole foods, which means removing. It's not just adding, but it's removing. So we talk about growing food, removing the toxins that are in the food, removing a lot of the oils that are in the food, which are adding to cardiovascular disease, and overweight, which is connected to diabetes, which is not just about sugar, it's about fat also. But people don't know that science, and therefore they're clinging to these memories and these emotions around food that is harming them. So I'm really interested in how you see empowering people around food in a way where they can unhook from this system.
Yeah, could I jump on that? Yeah, oh my God, you touched on so many things. I would say to go back to that whole cultural thing, because it's so important. You mentioned emotion to food, like emotional. Yeah, because it's emotional, but it's the comfort. It's the comfort of food. One, food is a language. You're speaking generationally by what you serve on a table, by the ingredients that you choose, based on the ingredients that you freely might have gotten, or the ingredients that were just sort of relegated, that you were relegated to, and the sort of scraps, to mention this idea of slave food. Yes, I mean, that is a reality here, and I would say in all of the diaspora for the most part, or at least on this hemisphere, that we all come from communities, if you're Afro-descendant, communities where you had to make do with what you had. And to this day, I still live in a community that you do that, because it's all an extension of the same system, the same issue 500 years later. And so it's really maybe reframing this whole thing and saying, maybe, yes, these are the foods that we ate for these reasons. Prior to that, we ate other foods, right? The foods that we ate are, are the many. It's in our lineage now, and it is the food that we celebrate with that associate culture, that associate now lineage to your ancestors on this land now. And so it's very important that people feel like they're celebrated in food as the way that that happens. But maybe it's reframing it and it's not about slave food because people are eating the same food now. It's about, yes, this is resilient food, I would say, instead of framing it like that. This is resilient food for the people in their time when they needed to be resilient. And thank God they were resilient, that now we get to take the baton, right, and engage differently with food. We are not there, but we celebrate that because we celebrate our ancestors. And so I think that's the approach that we should have, and there should be deference given to these practices because they were as a result of survival, right? To that said, now I'll bring it forward to how do we do this? How do we now sort of reconnect with other types of food? And that really is, for example, a project that we're working on with the New York Botanical Gardens and Dr. Jessica Harris. It's called the African American Garden. And this year is its third iteration. The first one was the African American Garden. The second one in 2023 was the Afro-Caribbean experience. And then this one, which is the final one, is going to be all-encompassing. But I say that to say that we are telling the story of this transatlantic slave trade that resulted in us telling a story of food, through food. One, the food that the enslaved ate in terms of plants, right? And so we're telling a story based on research and historical knowledge of those foods that were brought from Africa that were now planted here. Also, in terms of lineage, what these foods meant religiously, etc. And then we told the story of the Caribbean, the peoples of the Caribbean, and what these foods are, the foods that grew there, and the traditions and the names, etc. And so what we did essentially was also tell a story of lineage that has obviously developed, but we're reconnecting to these plants. And we are, for example, showing youth and thousands of people that come to the botanical gardens where this connection is to this idea of fresh food and how it's not alien to us, right? It's actually, this is where we come from. We were essentially, our ancestors at least, were taken and enslaved as a result of the incredible technological feats that they had in agriculture, right? And it was that was also so attractive to a slave owner. And so I say that to say that us reconnecting to the truth that extends farther than 400, 500 years reconnects us to our food lineage and allows us now to activate that in the present. It is about activating that right now and us engaging that because it's in our DNA. These foods still are passed down and we still have these reactions. Just as we have bad reactions to certain foods because they're not native to our bodies by lineage, so will we have it when we start engaging with foods that are traditionally our foods.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, someone put in the chat, Kristen, who is also a plant-based chef, put in the chat about eating like our ancestors. And I feel like that's what you're talking about. because when we talked, Jacque, you were talking about how the seeds were hidden in the hair and the fabric, and that there must have been something that they knew about those foods and their ability to sustain us. And we are talking about seeds that grow plant foods. So I don't think there's any better answer than that to address that phrase, eating like our ancestors. So we're having an event that's coming up. We're going to be doing a movie night on the 22nd of February in Harlem at Gin John Cafe. If you're not aware of it, they are two brothers who have opened this African coffee cafe, but now they're starting to serve food. And so when I was talking to Muhammad, one of the owners, and I was saying, well, we want you to make some plant-based dishes. And I was explaining to him, he said, there's no such thing as vegan or plant-based in Africa. We don't do, because everything we have is so full of vegetables. Now they do have meat, not at Jinjan, but other places. But he said it's really vegetable centric. And so I thought about that, you know, how you can live in a society, but that is, I do believe, Henry, it has everything to do with lineage and who we are. And so, yeah, thank you. Oh, Kristen said, yeah, that's great. Thank you, Kristen. And so these are some of the answers to how we can get back to that place of balance, right? And not just eating the food, but respecting the food, honoring the food, right? Having a value of what it means when people talk about mindful eating, for instance, what it means to sit down at a table. That was one of the things that we taught when I was teaching parents is mealtime should be together, sitting down. We're such in a rushed society now. Everyone's eating on the go. Everything is about convenience, but it's the connection that happens not just between you and the food, but you and your family, or you and the people that you're eating with. So Jacque, I wanted you to kind of weigh in on that as it relates to Seeds to Inspire and how you have worked with people, families, through trauma wellness, but this relationship with food.
Thank you for that question. I think the majority of the reason why I speak is because of understanding and embodying the truth that food is medicine, that food is life, that our nourishment, what Mother Earth, what Gaia, what Pachamama provides for us to consume is our medicine. And we understand also that what heals kills, and what kills heals. And when we look at food directly from source, directly from her, that provides us with our nourishment, and the further we get away from that, we see that the food that heals us becomes the food that kills us. And so when you help people understand that and say, listen, when I start reversing, when I was on that trajectory to food was killing me, I realized that everything was in boxes and bags and jars and bottles, right? And when I started reversing that and going back to the food at its source, two things happened. I reversed all my chronic diseases. I reversed 164 pounds of excess weight. I reversed my type 2 diabetes. I reversed my hypertension with an arrhythmia. I reversed the psychosomatic disorder, gastric reflux, restless leg syndrome, all of it. And I'm on no medications. I am 51. I'll be 52 this year. I'm on no medications. I am chronic disease free, and I live pain free. I live a life that's loving. I have great relationships with my children, and that took work. So also teaching people that what we feed our bodies creates the environment for ourselves to actualize the light and the beauty of who we are meant to be on this planet, or who we are meant to be as human beings. So what are we providing? What is the fuel that we're providing for these bodies for us to actualize our best? So food is much more than just something of convenience. We have to understand that food is everything. The what we consume is everything. And I have a quick anecdote about the trauma piece. When I first started exploring health, and I went with Thanksgiving, And I laugh because I compassionately can look back on it now and understand. But I made a few dishes. It was like potluck style with my family. You know, we're Puerto Rican family, Lower East Side. So I go and I make this, my dishes. And I decided to make them from scratch, which is a big deal for the way I grew up, right? Everything was convenience food. So it was like a big deal, make it from scratch. And I show up, and the majority of my family rejected it. They weren't even interested. They didn't even want to try it. They were so angry because I had gone against our culture. And for years and growing up, there were certain things that were served on Thanksgiving, and they came out of cans and boxes and jars. And because I did not align to that, somehow I was challenging that. Somehow I was defying that. Somehow I was saying unspokenly that I did not want to do that, that I thought I was better. So there was all this unspoken communication because in that action of thinking I was being healthy and being a model of health, was actually confronting a lot of the attachment to these foods, a lot of the attachment to what we define as our culture. And so we have to talk about that. We really have to understand what is the attachment besides all the chemicals that has us physically addicted to these foods, but that emotional piece, and what does that really mean? Because one of the greatest healings that I've done was to re-indigenize myself and to uncolonize my body. And that meant uncolonizing my body from the colonizer diet. That was imperative for my healing. And when I did that, I started remembering, well, what did I eat growing up? And I started remembering what my grandma would cook and my great grandma would cook and my papa would make when we were hungry and we were little kids. And it was all plants. It was all plants. And all of a sudden, when I started cooking like that again, I realized that I had robbed my children of that use of what it was like to smell sofrito frying. So you could throw the arroz con gandula and put it out, like those things I started bringing back to my home. And I fell in love again with my culture, my true culture. And it really brought an understanding of who we are when we indigenize, that I was now feeding from the soil my Taino warriors that were growing up to be incredible men on this planet. And I, as their mother, was doing the best I could because now I do better. Now I know better. So it was all of that piece that was able for me to recapture my culture and really find that pride in it again and be able to pass it on to my children.
Yeah. Wow. I love that awareness, right? It's the deeper awareness where we check in with our bodies and we ask our bodies, right? We ask them what they want. And I think when we're able to do that, we do make that connection. And someone put fruits and vegetables in, which is absolutely true. And I love the perspective about decolonizing or uncolonizing our bodies. When I think about fruits and vegetables and the difference in my life from prior, when I was developing conditions and I had surgery, 4 surgeries, 3 surgeries, was about to have a 4th. And, all of these other things, when I changed how I ate, I received health. But one of the other things I received was joy. And that for me was a surprise because I was just looking for physical health because I did not want another surgery. And the doctor was using the C word. And I was like, no, not me, not me. And I changed overnight, which is not what many people do. They go through this slow process. But I received joy and I received peace. And even to where people were engaging me with me, and they were looking at me, but they were also saying like, what's going on? You're different. And all I could point to was this diet, this plant-based diet I was on. I wasn't taking any medication, just like you said, right? I wasn't doing any sort of procedures, but everything, hair, skin, everything. But it was because of that connection with who I was made to be, that brought me back. So that's what we want people to connect with. It's something that you have to try. right? You've got to give it a try if you want to know. Absolutely, food is medicine and we know that medicine is food because when you look at it's plants, right? It's things that come from trees. Even if you look at the pharmaceuticals, they're using plants to create these things, right? It's just unfortunately by the time we get them, they are many times damaging to our system. So I have one last question for you. We're wrapping up. We've got just a few minutes. But my last question for you is about what you've eaten. And I wanted to know, what was your last plant-based meal? You can share if you cooked it or you got it from somewhere. And what would you say was so good about it? Henry, did you want to share?
Yes, I want to share because I just came to this dish, and I would love for everybody to partake. So, but to backtrack real quick to what you just said about plant-based foods, I think it's because the plants activate these other components where the joy does come, the clarity, the mental clarity. There's just, the world opens up in a different way when you engage in a plant-based diet, and that's what I know for sure. Now, when it comes to my dish, it is very simple. It is a green banana porridge that I am obsessed with right now. It's literally organic green bananas. I put them in a blender with the peel and all. Okay, yes, with the peel and all. And then I cook that with either some water or some coconut milk, and nutmeg and cinnamon, and it's the most delicious thing I've ever had. It's filled with fiber and just it gets you full, but also so light. And I've been obsessed. I've been eating it every day now for the last 3 days.
Thank you. We'll have to talk about that recipe.
Yeah.
About you?
If I can also address what you said also. Listen, when I was with all my chronic disease and morbidly obese and all those medications flowing through my body, I never felt okay. Without all those medications in my system and without the diseases ravaging myself, when you feel that good, you are joyful. When you feel that good and you forgot that you could feel this good, you can't help but to feel joyful and want everybody else to feel the way you're feeling. It's contagious. Like you really, really want everybody. That's why I do what I do. Because I'm like, seriously, it doesn't have to be this way. You can really feel good. So I want to say like nothing, like I think it's Dr. Greger that says that nothing tastes as good as healthy feels. And that's like my mantra. And so the last thing I ate was a chickpea tuna salad on homemade bread, and I make a big batch of it, and I just eat it for a couple of days like Henry. It's like my favorite thing to do.
It's one of my favorites. So thank you everyone for coming on tonight, and just so much love to both of you, and sending out peace and joy. And I do want to mention again, to join us February 22nd live for movie night as we screen The Game Changers at Gin John Cafe in Harlem. You can register at the link there, or you can use the QR code. And a huge thanks to Nicole, who's doing production in the background. We just are so happy that Jacque and Henry, that you are part of this community. We can't wait to have you back again. And good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thanks for having me. Good night.